everyone. I'm Sally Eves, CEO of Tomorrow's Tech Today. I'm delighted to be joined today by Hayley Bromilow, who is Chief Operating Officer at Innovate Finance. Welcome, Hayley.
Hello, welcome. Yes, thank you. Delighted to be here.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Lots of shared interests around all things tech for good, I would say, Hayley. So it's great to speak to you. And maybe as a starting point, just for the audience, we could just introduce yourself, your role, and a bit more about what Innovate Finance does.
Yes, definitely. So as mentioned, I'm Chief Operating Officer at Innovate Finance. So I work very closely with the senior leadership team, our fantastic CEO, Janine Hurt, and our board to really drive the strategy and the business needs of the entire UK fintech ecosystem. So Innovate Finance, we represent the UK fintech ecosystem. We are a membership organisation, so we have members that range from your really early stage startups all the way up to your high growths, the big banks, big techs, investors, professional services firms and hubs. So we kind of cover the whole ecosystem. We bring together everybody through a number of different programs, events, initiatives, really working on kind of lobbying and championing the fintech sector here to ensure that the UK retains its leading global edge in the UK fintech space.
Fantastic. I think that ecosystem word is so important there. And I've been to a few of those events myself, and it really is bringing all those voices together. It's an amazing way to scale innovation for business and society as well. So love that,
Yeah.
Hayley. Thank you so much. And kind of continuing that theme of setting the scene, again, kind of looking at your membership at the moment, obviously there are so many kind of vectors of change happening at the moment, so many challenges. And I'd like to explore a little bit more about how you're supporting people in your membership and obviously beyond as well with advice and support too. In particular, looking at things around financial inclusion or its exclusion. So some new research by LexisNexis Risk Solutions was showing 1 in 7 people, so it's around 7 million adults in the UK are now recognised to be financially excluded. So for example, because of this, you haven't got access to fair and affordable and accessible financial services. And the reason behind that is lack of a credit profile that's good enough to secure it. And I'd love to explore what that means, what that good enough means, and the effect of that cost of living crisis affecting so many people at the moment. How are you seeing this from your membership point of view? And what are you doing to help that at the moment? And what more do you think we can do together?
Yeah, and when you say that, it is still worrying that there's that many people just in the UK alone that are excluded. Obviously, worldwide, much more than that. I mean, over the years, we have seen fintechs really step up to address this challenge, and these current times, are no different. It is worth noting that actually many point to the 2008 financial crisis as the start of the current fintech movement. So at a time of economic turmoil, the innovators and new entrants were stepping up to rebuild that trust and resilience in the financial sector and provide better, easier, and I guess cheaper financial services for the end consumer. So now, almost 15 years later, still facing, some challenging times, and the fintechs again, will be required to be agile, to be flexible, and have that innovative mindset that can really support the end consumer. I guess at Innovate Finance, we do remain optimistic about the solutions available. There are many innovative fintech companies out there that are here to support those consumers that maybe don't have the traditional access to financial services. As an example, you have Mina Technologies. They're one of Innovate Finance members. They've implemented innovative solutions for consumers to monitor their subscription spend, which is a great initiative that they're doing. You have Snoop, that's another great fintech company that have produced a money management app. So you can go in, you can look at kind of how you're budgeting, how you're saving, a real kind of full suite of money management. Another great fintech out there really supporting the end consumer. And Totally Money, another great fintech company that is helping people increase and improve their credit score. So we are seeing this innovation. We are seeing these products that are available for the end consumer. It's just making sure that we continue to create that accessible and transparent financial services sector for everybody. So we are talking to firms, we're talking to government, we're talking to the regulators and companies like Citizens Advice, particularly around the rules on open banking. We want these to be extended into things such as mortgages, for example, which would really help and provide, small firms with cheaper payment processes, which will help, again, the end consumer. And there is also an opportunity to work with the regulator to agree how we can widen and access financial advice through data and tech-enabled robo-advice. So these conversations are happening, and with the aim that will make financial services just even more inclusive.
Fantastic, Hayley. Thank you so much for sharing that depth of examples. It's great to see so many innovations kind of spurred by necessity, really. We see that so many times, don't we? We saw it in the healthcare space with COVID as well.
Yeah.
When we can come together and really innovate for good, we can scale that and accelerate that innovation curve dramatically. So I really hope we can come together in the same way we did, around COVID times for things like the cost of living crisis and other areas too, like sustainability and the SDG challenges. And what I loved about the examples you mentioned there is that they're all very empowering. It was enabling consumers to make more conscious choices, to bring together those insights around, for example, their subscriber spend into one place. And that's what we need, I think, isn't it? That kind of one single point of visibility to make it easier to see where you can make savings and things. At the moment, it can feel very siloed and it can be quite a challenge to bring that together. So great to see those examples there. Thank you so much for sharing. Another area I think that's central to the credit risk challenge is looking at areas of credit risk scoring itself. Some of these methods have been around for about 20 years, so there's been kind of a bit of a stagnation maybe about how we do this. I'd love to bring in a couple of examples that I've seen in Africa. I'd love to see what you've seen here about, is this time for a change right now? What are you seeing happening in fintech to develop new approaches to credit scoring that can be more inclusive?
Well, interestingly, this is actually a space where we've seen quite a lot of innovation taking place, especially in the last, I'd say, 3 to 5 years. There have been several fintech companies that have really stepped up to address these challenges. So we are actually seeing innovation, a lot of innovation in this space, and are confident that there are, a number of fintechs out there that can support everybody's credit score.
Luke, I think some of the important strands you mentioned there, that personalization piece, making it accessible. And I love what you were saying there about that kind of being part of the everyday. If it's more freely available to check this on a weekly basis, as one of those examples there, it makes it something that kind of puts into people's habits.
Yeah.
It's part of everyday practice. It's not something you have to think about as much, and you just learn through that experience on a regular basis. I think that's brilliant. And I mentioned there about examples in Africa. I think there's things that we can learn from there. There's a few other countries that have done this too. But how can you find alternative sources of data that can help you prove creditworthiness? So a project I was involved in was working with farmers. And they were looking to get kind of microfinance loans and had no way to access traditional sources of finance because of this credit scoring problem, amongst other things too. And we did a project using things like SMS data, and you could show over a period of time how transactions have been successful. It was almost like bartering those types of practices, but using mobile phones. And it showed, over a period of time, promises were met, the delivery was made. You could show this is a worthy person who should be able to get that access to finance too. So I think we can take a lot of lessons there where we've seen innovation in other areas and different contexts, and what we can do, back in the UK and other places too. So definitely great to see what's happening. And I think, again, it's always good to look at different examples, isn't it, about what we can take from that.
Yeah, definitely. The agriculture point you make is actually a really big one. So there's a lot of innovation happening in that space, and like you say, that actually other sectors can learn from and reference and use. And I know, I've seen it similarly from African, innovative companies. So a really great point you make actually on the agriculture piece.
Thank you. So it's great to see that although there has been some areas where maybe change hasn't happened as much, we're seeing that acceleration now. And again, as we're both saying, the more we can draw on those different examples and bring them together, I think absolutely the better. I think another area where we're seeing change is also around policy guidance and governance around these areas too. So obviously the FCA brought in new guidance very recently, and particularly around how to understand the needs better around vulnerable customers. What is your kind of take on that from Innovate Finance point of view? How do you think the sector should respond to this new advice?
So I guess it's worth noting, so last year, the FCA introduced guidance on fair treatment of customers in vulnerable circumstances. It's important that we reference that as opposed to vulnerable customers, two different
Yes.
things. So it's obviously now more important than ever in the cost of living crisis. It means that the nature of vulnerable circumstances may be deepening, with many more people entering this category, unfortunately. The consumer duty, which comes into force for regulated firms next year, is an additional factor now that companies have to take account of. So that will be in their communications, their product design, customer service, marketing, all things like this, to ensure that actually there are positive outcomes for consumers. Fintechs are actually really well placed to use data to better identify signs of potential vulnerable circumstances, which means they can really start to identify this and take this as a first step in them in taking appropriate action. As we enter, or we're kind of in this period of economic volatility and rising prices, it's also important to note that people are actually kept under review, because circumstances can change, where someone may be in a particular circumstance now, in maybe 6-12 months time, that may change. So we just need to make sure that the methodology that companies are using to identify vulnerable circumstances is continually reviewed and updated to make sure, obviously, that we're looking at all consumers.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point about that speed of checking about
Mm, mm.
circumstance change. I think that's so important, particularly when we see, well, so many vectors of change over the last 2 or 3 years. But even with energy, I think would be a great example of this.
Yeah.
So for example, I was involved in some research looking at work from home trends and where that would be going. And everything was showing, in many cases, like a 3-2 in terms of being more remote versus more in the office.
Yeah.
But already prices of electricity is starting to see research, it's very, very current, very recent. Actually, the latest findings are kind of seeing more back to the hybrid or 3-2 the other way,
Yeah.
purely because of that cost. So, in a 3-month period, things can look incredibly different for so many of us. So I'd love to drill into that a little bit more, if that's okay. Cost of living crisis is on everybody's minds at the moment, from a domestic, from a commercial point of view. It's affecting so many people. So that cost of doing business, whether it's energy, as I was talking about there, but also things around raw materials, supply chain challenges, loan rates, etc. too. So many different things are really putting that squeeze on businesses, particularly SMEs. So how is fintech supporting this, and how is fintechs themselves coping with this change as well? I'd love if we could look at that from both perspectives.
I guess it's challenging times for consumers and businesses, as you point out. Businesses are struggling, and like any sector, fintech is facing challenging times. We're seeing that entrepreneurs and founders are really monitoring their cash conversion cycles more closely. I guess when it comes to competition, they're trying to stay ahead by eliminating inefficiencies and reserving cash. I guess that's the number one priority, kind of, making sure that their runway is extended and they do have that cash flow. We're seeing companies do more frequent reporting. So the finance teams are getting, more heavily involved in that more frequent reporting to monitor cash flow, look at their spend, look at where actually they can streamline, reduce costs. And also, there's added pressure from company investors, for companies to do this. I think the fintech companies, like any sector, as I said, face the challenging times, but those that actually are well prepared, they're planning accordingly, they're aware that actually, that this may go on for quite a time, then fingers crossed we'll actually be able to weather the storm okay. But it's just making sure that they're reserving that cash, they're understanding the challenges, and they are planning and prepping accordingly.
And I think one of the things that springs to mind there, that I'm seeing a lot of fintechs and tech companies more broadly, is bringing other areas into the data that's available to you to help you make better choices about where you can be more efficient.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'd love to see is, like, obviously you talked about agritech earlier, but a different example around, say, ESG, particularly around sustainability. Actually, if you improve your measurement around those areas, not only can you be reducing things like energy consumption and supply chain impact, for example, but you can also be saving money in your organization as well. You can do a lot of smart choices where you can create that shared value. So I've seen a lot of improvements around kind of that single pane of glass visibility about metrics, so you can get that information more easily, make those choices, save on cost efficiencies, but also make a difference with that societal impact I was talking about too. So I'm glad to see that we're definitely making a lot of progress in that area. It's another example of innovation too. So it's great to see we've got these challenges, but there's direct, tangible actions taking to try and manage this better and support people. So great to see that.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, actually, the data piece is key. And that's what we're seeing a lot of fintech companies actually utilizing different partners or service providers, as you say, that they come in and actually, review their operations so they can look at streamlining and seeing actually where they can reduce costs. And there are even actually a number of fintech companies that do offer that carbon review and ESG piece as well, which we're seeing, emerge in the sector as well. So yeah, definitely worth companies exploring further.
Absolutely. Shared value benefit, as I like to call that. I couldn't agree more strongly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other area, so if we go back to challenges again and how to resolve them, are kind of dynamic for today. One of those other areas that's affecting business costs as well is things around AML compliance. I think compliance just generally is certainly something that obviously it gives great benefits, but managing that the right way can introduce complexity as well. I think recent research gained by LexisNexis was showing it's around 30 billion pounds per year is the effect of this in terms of costs on UK business alone, and that's something that's still rising too. The other area I think that's really interesting about that report and that data was around the use of technology in AML as well, and it's vis-a-vis other areas it's still quite low. For example, how much is spent on staff. So do you think there's an imbalance there? What do you think we can do better to accelerate that curve, to use that phrase again, around faster adoption of technology to support better management of AML compliance?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that with the figures, it sounds like an imbalance. I think the main blocker has been regulatory attitudes to reg tech in the AML space. We are seeing this starting to shift though, which is very positive news. So we have a number of members that have interesting use cases for AI and machine learning as it applies to AML. The issue we have is that the UK regulators and government are still developing their approach to AI use. So this is one of the reasons why technology just hasn't been adopted as quickly as it could. I guess the positive is that for the past few years, the FCA have actually run some tech sprints with a specific focus on financial crime. And that is actually really positive because, as I said, it showcases that the mindset is shifting, that actually we hopefully shall see a lot more tech adoption in the space and it be able to move faster. We definitely encourage greater collaboration with industry to unlock benefits in this space because we do see it as a core blocker at the moment for some companies.
Thank you, Hayley. Honestly, I think that's a great deep dive into what's happening in this space at the moment. I love those sprint examples that you mentioned. Again, I was involved in one of those too, and I think it is a real kind of milestone moment in terms of that mindset change that you were talking about there. It's great to see that, and I just think it's an indicator as well more generally. When I talk to different businesses, this compliance feature is one that's a challenge across all sectors, and it's that word complexity. The more we can do to reduce that, to make things easier to manage, it makes such a difference. And again, it's how we remove these different blockers to change, isn't it? So great that we're taking those steps forward. And I look forward to seeing what more can be done about this, because I do think it's a really important one that's just going to grow in terms of an issue, but equally an opportunity if we manage this the right way over the next 12 months or so. So as we bring our time together today to a close, and I think we definitely have to revisit this because there's so much to this area. Perhaps we can do some kind of top takeaways, if you will, about if you could give a top 3 to your members and broader public awareness too, about what advice you would give to manage this situation better, in these volatile, changing times, and the ambiguity around all of this as well. Because again, I think that's one of the things that affects so many people is the not knowing, and how to be better prepared for that. And what would you kind of your top 3 nuggets of places to go for more resources? Obviously, Innovate Finance themselves, but yeah, something like that where we could kind of end this on a positive note about, okay, we have these challenges, but you know what? We have these here ready to support you right now that you can look to help you.
Yeah. So I guess to your point of top three, so yes, Innovate Finance, companies such as ourselves that are really here to support the entire UK fintech sector. As I said, through a number of different initiatives, programs, we lobby and champion the UK fintech sector, always listening to the community on what more can be done to advance the sector here in the UK. I think two, listen to your board, talk to your leadership team, talk to others in the fintech community that are going through these similar challenges. You'll be surprised at how open the rest of the community are in offering best practices, advice, tips, and all things like that. So really do lean on the entire community as well and people in your network. And three, yes, sometimes there's negative press around investment, around talent, but there are still companies that are investing in fintechs. Make sure you have a solid business proposition. Make sure you understand your USP and you stay focused, but also don't be afraid to pivot if things aren't working out for you. Now's the time, as we say, it is challenging. The entire world is faced with uncertainties, but with challenges also come opportunities, as you say. And we do see that there are plenty of opportunities still in the fintech sector here. And we've got a number of great companies doing very innovative things, which we love to continue supporting. So there'd be my top three nuggets of advice right now.
I love that. Fantastic. And I tell you what, I'll add to a little bit to that as well. So we'll get another three in. So we've got kind of six top
Brilliant.
tips then.
Six.
What do I go for? I will say, look at your skills training as well. Because I always say, we've talked quite a lot about technology innovation today, and that can enable so many opportunities and to tackle these challenges better. Make sure you couple that with skills training too. And in particular, we mentioned data a lot today. Help people who are also in non-technical roles get the most from that data and feel confident to use it as well. So investment in data literacy, I think, is hugely important too. And I'm going to do a top two, like second nugget that also relates to skills. It's about skills confidence.
Yeah.
So one part of that is that enabling that access, that democratization to those opportunities, but helping people feel confident to actually apply them too, I think is really key. So invest in areas that support that. So kind of like the STEAM learning approach, as I would call it, because again, it helps you to apply them and to be more confident and adaptable to the different changes we're seeing here at the moment. And again, I'm going to go back to the network that you have at Innovate Finance, these events that you run, and also social media space as well. There's so much positive content there where you can go and find a mentor. You can reach out to people. You can find your community that's got the same interests as you, and often get very free, very timely, very meaningful advice and support. And again, from the other point of view as well, be a sponsor for others. If you see an opportunity where a fintech could fit and fill a gap, go for that, help people out and bring that community feel together. That's how we can scale contagion of positive change. And finally, the third one, I think I might have had more than three now.
It's all right. Top 10 bits of advice.
The ESG argument as well that we mentioned earlier on. There's some real opportunities there. You mentioned about carbon accounting, for example, too. The biggest issue around ESG impact is how you scale that and how you measure that consistently across internal and external measures. The more there's a real opportunity to do that right for fintech businesses that will do great for innovation and business development, but equally does well for society too. I see that as a huge growth area, particularly around the measurement side of things. So to end on that high note as well, absolutely, we acknowledge the challenges here today, but there are ways here to come together across technology, across people, across skills and processes, etc. Really looking at it holistically to make a difference. So I thought we'd end it on that lovely high note in terms of let's come together for the common good. Thank you so much, Hayley. Honestly, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, and many thanks for all your work and all your team and everyone at Innovate Finance as well for all the support you're doing to help so many people at the moment. It really is well received and much appreciated.
Pleasure. Lovely to speak with you.
Thank you, Hayley, and thank you all for watching too. It's been great to contribute to this series. More coming soon. Thank you.